and welcome to Artwork, a conversation with creative people about the joys, the challenges, and the mundane moments of living an artistic life. We're your hosts. I'm Poppy Rose.
And I'm Brie Robertson.
And our artist today is Theo Toksvig Stewart.
Theo is a dyslexic writer and actor who trained at the Drama Centre London. He wrote his first play, Endless Second, during a particularly dry audition spell.
Endless Second deals with consent within a relationship, and it received multiple 5-star reviews as well as being shortlisted for 2 awards at the 2019 Edinburgh Fringe. It was then commissioned as an audio adaptation, which was transmitted on BBC Radio 4 in March 2021.
Alongside developing television ideas, Theo has been commissioned for a number of theatre projects and was part of the BBC Writersroom Drama Room scheme and the Minack Playwrights Programme.
We covered so much in this episode. Theo reminds us that what we do does not inform our whole identity, how he's managed to lay down boundaries between work and life, the importance of asking if you're the right one to tell a story as a writer, and his experience of taking a show to the Edinburgh Fringe.
We'd never met Theo before, and by the end of the conversation, we felt like we'd known him for years. He opened up about the challenges he's experienced as an actor and writer and offered so much wisdom from the journey that he's taken.
In this episode, we talk quite candidly about rape and consent because of Theo's play Endless Second. We just wanted to let you know so you can make the right decision that protects you.
Let's dive in.
Hello, welcome Theo to the podcast today. I'm so excited to talk to you. How are you feeling today?
Very, very excited / kind of nervous. I've never done a podcast before, a long time listeners podcast, but never actually spoken on one before. So yeah.
Oh, exciting. We're your first one. Oh, we hope you have a good time today.
That is exciting.
Let's start off by, do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners? How would you describe what you do and who you are?
I would say my name's Theo. I'm a actor and writer, general performer, basically. Writing for like stage, screen, radio, anything anyone will let me do. But yeah, I'm also just a guy, you know, with big old family, nephews, nieces, lots of different types of siblings. Yeah, and what else do I like? I like rock climbing, big runner, that sort of thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Fantastic. What's your favourite food?
Oh, I couldn't even pick. I'm vegetarian. My girlfriend's vegan, so I'm mostly vegan. I have like an egg very occasionally, but I would have to say that curry is just like the best food on the planet. I think you have to think that when you're a vegan because it's just so much easier. Yeah.
Great introduction. Awesome. You did it.
I did it.
First question.
So you're an actor and a writer for all sorts of theatre things.
Yeah.
Tell us, how did you first get drawn to acting and the theatre? Like, do you have a first experience where you're like, yes, I love this and I want to do this?
Well, I'm massively lucky because the theatre and just acting, entertaining is like in my family. My mum's in the business, and so we were always, you know, taken to shows and musicals. That was like our big sort of growing up, was going to London and seeing what was on in the West End, like a big musical or something like that. I'm sure I was taken to the theatre when I was like just too young to appreciate it, which is obviously like, you know, massively incredible as well. But then so I've always just like really enjoyed it, and it's always been a passion. But then when I was a teenager, I was actually training to be a tennis player, because all middle class people when they're teenagers have to be training to do a professional sport, and that's just the rule. And then
I was going to be an Olympic swimmer.
There we go. Who is the gymnast? Raise your hand. But I just basically had no friends. So my mum enrolled me, or one of my mums enrolled me in local youth theatre, just basically to meet someone. And I just had such a good time, and I was like, oh my god, this is so much better. And I did they had like auditions for like Edinburgh Fringe. Basically, there's a really good youth theatre. It's called the Evenana Youth Theatre, in my hometown in Guildford, and they were doing Edinburgh Fringe, and I auditioned and like got into both the shows and just did that, had the best time, because I was homeschooled for ages for like this tennis thing, and then just the social aspect of it. I was like, well, I'm definitely gonna do this. This is just the best, and then just continued with it. Did it at A levels, and then was like, why would I stop doing this? Because this is really fun. I think I'm just really a big child.
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all? Yeah, exactly. And just continued with it. Went to drama school, did all that sort of thing, and it's just, yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. Really, it's just like it was a way for me to sort of reintegrate into society after having been locked away for like a couple of years.
Yeah, I feel like tennis is such a solo sport that it's not something you do you play to be social. And
no, and there was like, I think there was like 6 of us at the start who like trained together, and then after 2 years, I think there was literally just me and this one girl left. Like everyone sort of petered off, either quit or went somewhere else, sort of thing. And by the end of that, it was like just seeing this one person every day, and then going home and doing your schoolwork, sort of thing. And it's just, and I'm definitely a competitive person because of it, but I wasn't competitive enough to really care if I wasn't winning. And I think what makes everyone talk about tennis for a minute, what makes like the best tennis players amazing is like they just will try and win at all cost. And I just didn't have that in me. I was kind of like, oh well, if I lose, I'll just go home. It's not, it wasn't really life or death for me in the way it is to other people.
Yeah. Wow. It's quite similar to my story, because I traveled around Australia for a few years when I was a kid, and was just pretty much like a caravan child. That we met kids in the caravan parks and stuff, but it was just me and my family, and I homeschooled for 4 years. And then when I was starting high school, they offered a drama subject, and I was so shy, and I was so out of touch with like social norms. I really didn't know like how to make friends. I was celebrating people's monobrows and stuff. It got really awkward.
Yeah.
And then I took a drama class, and all of a sudden this confident girl started to appear, and I started to make friends and join the youth theatre in my little village as well. And totally transformed my life.
I do think it's amazing, like for young people to do, just because they're, of all the people I did youth theatre with, there's like 3 of us they're still acting now, but it's like such a good way to make like all of my best friends from my childhood are all my youth theatre friends. Like I'm not really friends with like close friends with a lot of my college friends anymore. It's all those youth theatre people, and they're not actors now, and they look what they don't care about what I do. They've all got real jobs and all that sort of thing. So it's like, but that bond is like really special, but also like you say, like it can really give people confidence and like public speaking and all that sort of stuff.
So in the beginning, your goal was to be an actor. Had you ever considered writing before, or you were only kind of going down the road of being an actor?
I was just kind of going down the actor route. I had written as a teenager, like, shit poetry and all that sort of thing that will never see the light of day. But I hadn't really considered it. I guess I kind of knew maybe in the back of my head it was something I wanted to do. I really liked the idea when I was a kid of, being a writer, quote unquote, quite this like romantic ideal of someone who's sitting at like this old typewriter slowly typing away words. And I was like, that sounds really fun. But no, and then when acting was sort of just going, it was just that really. And it's sort of when I made the transitions from like tennis to acting, it was sort of just like, when you're just like doing something like, oh, that feels right, that feels fun, that feels more me. So yeah, I just wanted to continue doing that really.
Wow. And how did it go for you when you were going down the acting road before you kind of ventured into writing? What was that like to really be pursuing that acting dream?
Oh God, it's so horrible, but also great and fun and amazing. It's a weird. I mean, it's probably a lot of parallels you guys can draw because I think the acting industry is really hard, but I know the music industry is just horrid, and like I can't even imagine. I know people like trying to do it as well, and it's like I can't even imagine putting myself in that world. But like it's really exciting when you're first coming out of drama school and you're going up for all these auditions and you're meeting cool people and it feels amazing and you're like, oh, maybe this will happen and maybe this will happen. And then you kind of get and then this, I think like everyone leaves on a high to a certain extent, and then not that you come crashing down, but there's like a readjustment time, like a leveling off of, oh, actually, I mean, like my course was so intensive. Like we did 9:30 till 8:30 for like 3 years, and just to come out of that at all was just like, oh, anything. I started working on like street food stalls and stuff like that. Sort of how I've my keep basically majority of the time is like different aspects of cooking and chefing sort of thing. And like even that was just so much fun because I was like, I just had a life again. I could see my family, I could see all these people, and it felt amazing. And I don't know, I think it's something that people are always trying to, and the longer it goes on, the harder it gets to a certain extent, unless like your career is just like taken off. But for like, normal working actors like myself, filling the time between the two worlds, between the jobs, is just can be quite difficult, because a lot of time you want to be doing something that isn't like totally soul destroying, and that like you really just don't totally hate. But then a lot of places, you apply for a job, like a normal job that you'd also like want to do as well, but it's, they want a full-time commitment, which is totally fair. They don't want someone swanning in, swanning out when something else comes up, so to be able to find a side career that complements what you're doing as an actor is really difficult. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. I know a lot of people like are in, I mean, obviously the hospitality industry is just rife with actors, but fitness industry, and a lot of people are trained to be PTs. And I think the writing came out of some downtime and this sort of opportunity to basically make my side hustle, really, which is sort of mainly turning into my main hustle now. Yeah, I mean, like a bit weird, like someone might want to just, my mum was always like, are you sure you don't want to be a carpenter? And I was like, I kind of do, but I just think I'd be really shit at it. So I don't know. So I went with, writing, the other really staple, steady industry to move into.
Amazing.
So what kind of gigs, what kind of jobs were you doing as an actor?
As an actor, I was mainly just doing stage work, to be honest. I've mainly done that. I feel way more comfortable in that sort of realm. I think it's just something I know better than screen. I've only done like a couple of, like one telly job and then a couple of like short films sort of thing. So I did like a tour, which was really fun, around the UK, and then a lot of fringe theatre, a lot of small companies touring around London sort of thing. Did Edinburgh in 2019. So a lot of that sort of stuff, really. I'm trying to think if I've missed anything. Yeah, and I also did like voiceover work as well. That sort of came a bit later as well. Just my agents at the time set me up with a voiceover agent. And that's a really good side gig, because you can just waltz in, crack out in an hour, and get paid far too much money for what you've really done. So that's a really good side hustle.
You said in the email that you sent us that you've had to deal with a lot of rejection through this industry, and I have to say that after finishing theatre school, I jumped ship to music. Because I couldn't handle the rejection. I was like, I'm sorry guys, auditions are not for me. I'm just gonna go and play my music. And so I really feel like I was not strong enough for that, and I would love to maybe try again one day to prove that I can, not take it personally and go to auditions and do the best job I can. But what is the reality of like going to auditions and being told no, and dealing with rejection in just like everyday life? How did you find that, and how did you cope with that?
I think the difficult thing is, it's not that you're even getting told no a lot. It's that you're just not knowing. You're just not finding out. Like, there is such a bad practice in the acting industry of just like not telling people they haven't got a job, whereas you just don't really get that from any other sort of industry. And that's what's really difficult, because you're sort of weighing your time. You're like, okay, it's been a week, so I probably, if it's like after a recall or something, it's like, it's been a week, maybe they've got more recalls this week and I should hear next week, or maybe it's not happening at all, or maybe they're doing something else. You're just constantly living in this limbo of where have you got this, have you not, sort of thing. That's what the difficult bit is, because like having no is kind of fine because it gives you closure. It's like, okay, I didn't get that, but now I can be sad about it for a minute and then move on. But when you're constantly trying to move on from something, but there's a little flame inside of you that's like, but maybe you've got it. That's what the hard thing is.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd love to hear the word no, because it's like, oh, thank God it's over. So it's just one of those things. And the practice of having, I know that there's quite a bit of movement in the industry now to like give people that closure and to make the no more of a common practice, which I think is really great. But the actual day-to-day life of it, it's so hard. I don't know. I mean, I probably make it sound like worse than it is. It's because it depends on the day, you know.
Yeah.
Like some days you won't hear anything and you take it really personally. But also I've been on the other side of it, you know, thinking about people who you'd cast in stuff to a certain extent, and you realize so much of it just isn't personal at all. Like I've always fit, I think, into like a kind of strange casting bracket, because I'm like 5'6", so I'm not like very tall, and I'm a bit funny looking in a way. So I'm not funny looking enough to play the funny weirdos, but I'm not like tall and good looking enough to play the leading men sort of thing. So I'm sort of in this halfway house. And a lot of the time it's not about your acting. You know, you just walk in a room and there's going, I mean, I remember at youth theatre, you know, a lot of the time I was getting like, they, you know, in their recalls or whatever, they're like matching up pairings and stuff. And I remember doing Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and I got recalled for Peter, and then this other guy was recalled for Edmund, and we were reading together, and he was like 1.5 feet taller than me. So I'm like, well, obviously I'm not going to be the big brother, am I? You know, so a lot of the time it's that, you know, you walk into a room and you just don't look right. I think so little of it, to a certain extent, is like your performance on the day. Obviously some people can come in and absolutely smash it out of the park and, you know, change expectations, but a lot of the time it's that, you know, you hear people speak about, oh, it's how you open the door, you know, and then they know or not. So much of it is out of your control. And I think that's what drew me to writing as well, because it was sort of like a reclaiming of like some aspects of control.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it is. And it's something that you can have ownership over, and not that you're in charge, but you have more agency over it. That's what has been really difficult about the pandemic. You know, like my partner's an actor and she's really struggled because all the agency has just been taken away, because there's nothing you can do. And it's like, you know, she's keeping busy and doing all of this other stuff and like Zoom plays and like reading groups and staying active, but like there's so little you can do to actually fight against it. Whereas me, you know, this last year I've just been a writer. I haven't been an actor at all. I've just written like every day. Also, I should probably like caveat everything I'm saying by just like the fact, obviously, I'm massively privileged, and you know the ability, like when the pandemic hit, to go to my partner's parents and then come to my parents. You know, it's like, and then to have that space and that time to write is just like such a luxury that so many people throughout this whole year will never have. You know, and
absolutely,
it's given me space, and then like it's given me space to like understand my practice more in a way that I didn't understand it when I was working before lockdown. I was getting there, but like obviously just having this wealth of time and security to be able to like, right, just pretend you're a writer for a bit and then, you know, work in that way. And then that happened, you know, it's that thing. I mean, obviously I was writing before lockdown for like a year or two, a couple of years actually. So yeah, I went off on a bit of a tangent there.
No, that's great. That's kind of like segueing us into all the other things we want to talk to you about.
Okay,
but I really, what you said about like finding writing a way to reclaim your agency, I think for me that was also what music did for me, because I could go to a cafe, or I could go to a living room, or I could you know, do a live stream, and I'm in control of like what I sing, what my songs are, where I'm playing, and I can actually like make money from that without anybody else having a say over like how I do it, what I'm doing, where I'm doing it. And I think that for me was like something that I would have found very difficult if I had really pursued the acting road of just not having that agency every day.
It is hard because it is one of those things that's just totally swept away from you. Like, it's just out of your hands. And I don't think it's not about like being strong, because like you mentioned earlier, you didn't think you were strong enough for it. It's like, it's not about that. It's just, it's just about weighing up what is good for you and what is not good for you. And for some people, I mean, it's not good for anyone, but like, how much are you going to let that impact upon you? You have to become a bit of a sociopath in a way just to be able to turn off. Obviously, there are days where you can't turn it off and you feel like utter crap. But then there are other days where you get a recall, you get a job, and it's like the best feeling in the world. It's like, yes, come on. And you forget about all of it. And you're just in that moment, and it's just amazing again. And you're like, oh yeah, that's why I do it. So it depends on the life you want to live. Me and my partner talk about this a lot. It's like, the lows are the lowest, but the highs are the highest. And it depends. It depends if you're a sort of person that craves more stability. This will not be good for you. But I'm more comfortable sitting in this space of this volatility. I feel like it's exciting because maybe because I'm just a commitment phobe in terms of like thinking about life on a big scale. It's like the idea of, because like, what happens when you become a teacher? It's like, okay, you're a teacher forever. It's like, that terrifies me. And the ability and the possibility, the very faint possibility that I might be like jetted off to somewhere like random for like 6 weeks is like so exciting. And it's like, it just allows me to think on the short term. It's such a great way. I remember seeing Bryan Cranston give a talk when he was doing Network at the National a couple of years ago, and he's like one of my heroes. And he just had like this really good insight. He was like, when you're young, you're just putting it all out there. You're just throwing things everywhere, and you're getting nothing back. And that's what's exhausting about it. And that's what you have to just keep doing, is like, just keep going, because eventually you'll be throwing everything out and you'll get a little bit back. And that will let you throw more out. And you just got to keep going with it. And I was like, it really spoke to me on that level of, and I'm sure it spoke to the other hundreds of people that were in the room, of just like, sometimes you just need to hear it from someone who was there. Because, I mean, the industry is so different. I think that's also what's really interesting, is like, the industry now is so different from what it was before. Like, you always hear these stories of not everyone, but like a lot of people that are really successful and famous now. And they're like, oh, how did you get started? And I was like, oh, I just walked into this building and someone was like, hey, do you want to lead? And they're like, and then suddenly that, it's all those sort of things. And it's just like, does not happen anymore in that way. Like, I think he says in his, not even like just with acting, but it's just like, I think he was on a road trip with his brother or something like that. And then they stopped off at this really small theatre somewhere, and he walked in, and they basically needed like either a general manager or artistic director or something. So then he basically just talked his way into like running this theatre for a bit, and he was like 19 or 20. And it's just, that just can't happen anymore. You have to have had like 10 years experience before, and you can't get the 10 years experience because you have to have had 5 years experience to get the, it's this vicious cycle.
Yeah, how are you supposed to get experience if no one's going to give you the experience,
Wow.
I guess it also depends if you feel like you're in the in circle or not, because obviously once you're in and you're getting more, and it's feeding itself. Whereas I'm still definitely on the out. Like, maybe if there's like 7 layers of acting hell, I'm on like layer 6. I've probably like broken through 1 or 2 layers, and I'm just like slowly trying to get my way in. But like, it's the same thing as like what you say, like, people want you to have loads of experience. Like, you can't get the experience without the other experience. It's this total catch-22. And I think also what you have to like accept, I don't know, this happened for me. I think it probably happens for everyone creative. There was just like this moment where you sort of go, because I think everyone who goes to like, let's just say drama school, everyone's there because they think it's going to happen for them. Like, no one goes to drama school thinking, I'm going to maybe try this. You're going there because you think you're good enough and you think it's going to happen, and you have no doubt that it's going to happen. And then after you leave, whatever your circumstances are, that after a few months or a few years or whatever, there's probably a moment where you go, this might not happen for me. And I think you have to address that and like address that as a reality that this might happen, but also it might not. And you have to be okay with that. I think what's really important and what I'm really like trying to do is just not let my work define me. Because like, we live in such a culture of like, you know, productivity, and you must be doing everything you can every second. But it's such an unhealthy way to live. That's why like in the instant I'm talking about like my family and stuff, because I'm really thinking about the other aspects of my life that define what gives me joy and like my friends and all this sort of thing. Like you can't, obviously we all want to do something that we love and are passionate about, but I just don't think you can let that space define you as a person, because even if you're really even if you become successful in anything you do, like there are so few successful people that manage to sustain that over a career. If you've defined your whole life by it and then it's gone and you're 60 or whatever, it's like, oh, what do I do now? You know?
Yeah. I mean, this conversation has come up a lot recently in episodes we've recorded, and I know for myself, like I had really defined myself as a musician, and all of my identity and value and worth came from my career and my job and what I was doing. And it took the COVID lockdown and burnout on my own end as well to actually just like sit and think about, this is not how I want to continue my life. Being like, I put myself in this one little box of I'm a musician and that was it. But actually now I've got out of this box and getting to do other things and be other things, and like you say, not be just defined by your job, but be defined how you treat others, how you feel about yourself, how you make other people feel. It's so much more valuable, definitely. And I think what you were saying about you know, being in drama school, I mean, I went to music school, and they said to us on the first day, you know, only 1% of you are gonna, you know, make it, quote quote. And I literally sat there going, well, it's going to be me, 100%. Like, I'm going to be the next Taylor Swift. Like, who's like, why the rest of you here if you just want to be a music teacher? Like,
well, you guys might as well just quit now because I'm here. So, you know, you have to look at those people who get that, and like, if they're not comfortable with who they are, they'll attain that position that they've always dreamed of, and they still won't be happy. You know what I mean? Like, they'll still just be empty, and they'll have spent so long chasing this thing that they thought that they needed, and then they'll get there. And I think it was someone like Matt Damon said, because him and Ben Affleck won an Oscar for Good Will Hunting, like when they were mad young, like really young. I think it was for screenwriting or something like that. And he said that was like the best thing that ever happened to him, not because, you know, it's an amazing thing to happen, but he was like, it's incredible that happened so young because I didn't have to chase it after that. And he sort of like, you know, I got home and it was just, you know, my crap flat, and there's just an Oscar on the table, and it's like, okay, but that doesn't change anything around me. You know, it's that mentality of if you're not, I think, Bryan Cranston said it. I keep going back to, it's always back to Bryan. It's always back to Bryan. It's just, he is a legend. He just said like, it's like, sort your shit out before you go out there, because you'll be so much stronger for it. And that's something I've really tried to replicate.
That's amazing.
So I'm perfect, and now I can go out there and just all my shit sorted.
You're gonna have all your dreams. But I think that's interesting what you say as well, is when we're young, we have these massive ideas of like what we're going to do. And this is something I've really had to come to terms with, because when I was younger, my mum was like, you're going to do something huge with your life. You're going to change the world. And I grew up with this really narcissistic view that I was going to do something world changing. And like, as I've gotten older, I'm like, well, okay, I'm 30, and I don't know how that's happening yet. Like I still don't even really know what I'm heading towards. And I've done all these little things, but it's definitely not how I thought it would look like. And it's interesting how the perspective really changes as you age. And when you're young, it's like, it's either this or nothing. Then you get to a point where you're like, no, I'm actually really happy. I'm actually really happy doing tours around Europe with living room concerts. That's good enough for me, you know? Like, I don't have to be like on the top of the charts. The fact that I can play some music to, you know, 10 people in a living room who actually want to hear it, That's great. And I think the perspective of what we're aiming for needs to shift sometimes, because I think in our society we're not shown multiple ways to succeed within the arts. Sometimes we're shown like the superstar road, and then everything else is just not really seen or not really talked about. And so you kind of have to just find that on your own.
It's so true, isn't it? It's like we're all, I remember that exact feeling you're talking about. Like when I was younger, it's like, you know, every individual can change the world, and it's up to you, and you can do it. And it's really, it's so interesting that I think that's like obviously probably a really Western way of looking at the world, because we really value individuality. It's like the individual over like the collective. And it's really interesting because one of my mums is Danish, and like they have such a different outlook on life in terms of collectivity. Like there's this, I think it's like a motto or a saying in Denmark, which like on the outside sounds really horrific, but you know, it's paying off, because it's just like, you know, you're not special, you're not great, you're not amazing. And just like, you know, we are together, we are, you know, it's just, it's, and it sounds like a bit like, oh, that's, you don't want to tell a kid you're not special, but you know, in the I know what they're getting at, you know what I mean?
Totally.
It's like we said, when you get to the point of realizing you're comfortable, like, oh, I can do this living room tour sort of thing, and like just being comfortable with being able to express, like, you know, there are people that will kill to be doing that, and that's what you've always got to be thankful for. Like I did like a really small show, maybe my second year out of drama school, and it was after like a bit of a dry spell, and you know, it was at quite a small theatre, but it was really fun. And like I just remember doing it and being like, I can get, like, there's not much different between this and something else, and like the West End or whatever it is that like the big thing you're aiming for.
It is actually all about the journey and the process of everything than achieving your actual dreams, because when you achieve them and you reach your goals, like it doesn't feel that good for very long, at least.
No, it doesn't.
The journey of it is always going to be more enjoyable, and more emphasis needs to be put on that than the pedestal of like one big concert or one big award to be all you're living for, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. I love that you introduced yourself and told us that you also like rock climbing and everything, because it's really important that we have a life that's full with other things too, and that we have hobbies, and that we have things that we do just for fun, and that we have people in our lives that we can lean on and love and have fun with. And yeah, it's a really good reminder. No one's done that before on the introduction.
I know, it was
a
bit of a shock. I was like,
yes, originality. Come on.
Maybe we should start asking people from now on, like, what's your favorite food?
I've never asked anyone what their favorite food is. It just happened. But we do want to talk to you about the show that you wrote and took to Edinburgh, Endless Second. Tell us about this show. What is it about, and what came from this performance that you wrote?
So Endless Second is a play about consent. It's about two people who go to university together, and they meet, and like they have this amazing relationship. It's very, you know, young love, first love sort of thing. And then time passes, and about a year into their relationship, they're out one night, and they're at a friend's birthday. They both get really drunk, and then he takes her home. He puts her on the bed. He starts to initiate sex with her. She says no, but he doesn't stop. And that's sort of like the jumping off point for the rest of the show. And it's not so much about the rape itself. It's more about the effects of that afterwards. I was kind of looking at, I was just really interested in the idea or the provocation of, like, you know, the stereotype of rape being stranger, dark alley, all that kind of thing, when obviously the vast majority of people, especially women, are raped by someone they know. And what if that someone you know is also someone that you love? And I think it's just something we hadn't had a conversation about or seen before. It was it was inspired by a lot of things. I was sort of thinking about it for a really long time, but this is around like Me Too was just kicking off as well. It sort of instigated this idea of it, and I don't know, I've always felt like I kind of sit in, because I've got gay mums and like just shit ton of sisters, so I've always felt much more comfortable with women in my sphere and around me. And I think most of all of my closest friends, well, pretty much all of my closest friends are women, and I've always felt like a bit of an imposter in male circles and that sort of thing. And when Me Too was kicking off, it was really interesting that a lot of my female friends were opening up to me about stuff that happened to them, and it was really eye-opening. Just it's like pervasive, but you had no idea that it affects like literally everyone, and then just like the marked tone in the difference of the conversation in like male spheres of I can't really put not that like to make everyone sound blokey, but it was different, it was. And I wanted to cross like this gap that I felt I was sitting in, and I thought maybe men, well, I don't think maybe men are probably much more likely to just listen to a man tell you than a woman in a lot of ways. And that's when I saw this TED talk that you should probably post this in like the description or something, because it's amazing.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
it's a TED talk by a woman called Fordyce Elver and Tom Stranger, and basically they the long story, but long story short is he was on exchange when they were teenagers in Iceland. He's from Australia. They had like a relationship. He raped her in similar circumstances to what happens in the play, and then obviously he goes away back to Australia, and then she writes to him many years later being like, you did this, you did that, and then he wrote back and was like, yeah, I did, and I feel terrible about it and all this thing. And then they eventually met up in Cape Town, which was like this halfway house. Yeah, it's literally halfway between Iceland and Australia, but also like the rape capital of the world. And like, they hadn't seen each other in years, and then they just spent a week together, or maybe even more, I can't remember, in this place. And like to like, try and find some resolution for both of them, I think. And I was like, it was so fast. And just like when I was watching it, just the image of her standing on the stage, or just the two of them standing on the stage, and her going, he raped me, and him going, I did. It was just like blew my mind, because like I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen a man take responsibility for it in a public sphere. And that's not what the play's saying. It's not that like every man has to come out and publicly declare it, but like if he's willing to do that, it was such an incredible eye-opening experience, and just wanted to have that conversation really. In terms of like what came of the performance, we did it a few times. We did it in a very, very rushed production at a Theatre 503 in London in January 2019. Not rushed because just not rushed because of anyone else's fault, but we just me and the director Camilla Gertler, who runs Cut the Cord, who produced it, we were planning to do it at Edinburgh in the summer, and then this theatre were like, oh, we've got some open slots for January 2019, and this is like a really good new writing theatre, so we're like, oh, we'll apply. We won't get it, but we'll just apply. And then obviously we did, and we were like, holy shit. So I think we applied. We didn't find out until like Christmas, and then the shows were on like the 16th and 17th of January, and we had to like put a whole show together in that time, and it was it was mad. A lot of things came from that like show, like professionally, personally. I mean, it was definitely. I mean, like I met my partner doing the show, so that was obviously a really great thing that happened, and that's the best thing that happened from it, obviously. She's incredible. She's so talented. And then what else came from the show? Like, yeah, I mean, that really did kicked off and opened up a lot of doors for me. I mean, like the build up to that was like the most stressful 6 months of like my entire life, as someone who has no experience of producing, no experience of being behind the scenes. I'm just the guy out front normally going, hey, look at me, without there's obviously a massive team of people behind that have got you to that point. Just the stress of putting on a show and like fundraising. So like, again, checking in with the privilege, I was able to move home and live with my mum, so that when I was working I wasn't paying rent, and I was able to try and scrape together some money to put the show on, so that was obviously incredibly fortunate. But then luckily, like at the 11th hour, literally the 11th hour, and all of our funding opportunities had like all come to nothing. And I was like, oh, fuck, I've got to pay for this whole show. And it's like, we want to, you know, and Camilla is extremely professional, and she was also taking another show to the Fringe already. This one sort of came at a later date. So there was like a tiny team of us putting, it was absolutely mad. And they had funding for that one, didn't have funding for this one. And like all of our avenues just like didn't. And obviously, I mean, I could talk about Edinburgh for like a long time, because I don't know if that's interesting for people to talk about, because there was so much to unpack just from that. But it was so
Feel
stressful.
free to talk about it, because I think it is like, I think other actors do and performers.
The thing they don't tell you about Edinburgh before you like sign up is just how fucking expensive every single thing is. And like, you know, it's such an issue, because obviously it's only the most privileged people who are putting on shows there. Like, it is so expensive. It is mad expensive. Like, we were looking for a flat, you know, for the month for 6 of us. Like a 4-bed, you know, some of us all into like bunk up, double up, whatever. A 4-bed for the month was like £6,500. And you know, that's before we've even paid a single person for their work, which is what we were doing. You know, we weren't just going to take people up there and make them pay for it. You know, it was a professional company, it was a professional enterprise. We wanted to pay people going up there. But like, when you take that into consideration, I mean, the only reason we managed to do it is because Maddie, my partner, her parents live, and her grandparents live in Edinburgh and have for like her whole life. So, you know, they very kindly went and stayed somewhere else for a couple of weeks, and we had the first 2 or 3 weeks of the Fringe in their house. So we only had to pay for a couple of members of the cast to, you know, go somewhere else right at the end. So, you know, it's just like, it is. And then there's all these other hidden costs, not hidden costs, but like, you know, you got to pay for the marketing, the programming. And once you get up there, you know, you got to sell the show, and that's a whole other thing. And marketing is just like, if you don't have the boots on the ground dishing out flyers, you know, there were 6 of us across 2 shows, you know, which is nothing. And, you know, the other guy who was doing the other show, he was running the whole show. That's what their show was about. So obviously he wasn't flying because he was knackered the whole time. And, you know, he had to do a lot, you know, the physical exertion of just like the show on him was like, you know, they had to safeguard that. So then their show only had 2 flyers, and then there was my show. And then obviously our show also has some like really troubling material in it. That is like, when you're doing it day in, day out, it is just, you know, is really soul destroying in a way. And then also like going back to rejection, like the constant rejection of going, hey, do you want to come see our show? Hey, do you want to come see our show? And everyone like going, no, it's just like, you know, you're constantly putting it out there. And, you know, I just didn't feel like, it's sort of going back to what you said, Poppy, about burnout. Like, I just didn't feel like I could take a day off. I was like, no. And I literally couldn't, because like, I wanted to give my team the space to be able to like take mornings off if they needed it. Because you're like, it's just, you know, that you have to be a human about it. You can't be like, no, you're feeling terrible, get out there and fly. It's just, you can't be a dick about it. And so by the end, I think it was like a third to last performance, we're about to go on stage, and I was just like, I don't feel right. And I just had like a massive panic attack. I was just like, I can't go out there, I just can't do it. And like, it was really sweet of them, the audience that were in there. They waited at least 20 minutes for me to get my act together and go and do that.
So you also were acting in the show?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, a lot of the not a lot of the interest, but like at the same time I was writing it because I was like, I want to do this and I want to be in it. You know, it was in a downtime of trying to create work for myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, like writing it, produce, and also like, it's so nerve-wracking writing a show, because, you know, the amount, you know, when you're just in a show, people can go, you were great, the show was a bit shit, but you were great. But like, when you're in it and it's your show, you know, they can't say you were great, but, you know, there's that thing of, this is your show and this is something it's so much more exposing than acting, I think. Even though you're, as an actor, like, you're out there, but you have the mask of a character to hide behind. But like, when it's just your show, that's just you on a page, and it's so exposing in a way. I don't know if it's the same for when you guys put like music out there. Like, it's so exposing for people to hear inside your head.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something you guys like associated with.
Yeah.
And I hadn't experienced that before. But all in all, like, it was amazing. I did, like, the script got me onto a writer's Room programme at the BBC sort of thing, which like changed everything. But again, like, you know, going back to Rejection, not very quickly, you know, it still took me, I've only just signed with a writing agent, and it took me 2 years of like everything going right. And still people were saying no, you know, like, you know, I've like, since then I've had, you know, theatre commissions and stuff like that. And I've actually been getting paid to write, which is, you know, wicked. And I'd be like, oh, okay, now I can get an agent now. I'll try and get an agent to open those more doors for me. Even then people are like, nah, you know, love your stuff, but no. And it's the rejection of like when you're doing, or like when you're trying to replicate what other people have done, and you go, oh, that person's done it really well. How do I get what they're doing? Okay, they did this, this, and this, and then you do that, and that, and it doesn't happen. And you keep like putting these blocks on, but still no one is interested. That's what's really difficult. Whilst you'll feel like you're getting so far in one way, and then in one way you're still exactly where you were. You're not exactly where you were, but like from the outside it looks like it. So yeah, I did that BBC scheme, and from that, just more like, you know, it's just about getting in the room. And you know, then there are people that's what their job is to find emerging quote unquote talent, etc. So how, and then they open doors for you. And I've been writing theatre since then. I'm really hoping maybe soon I'll be having a TV show option sort of thing, you know, which is taking a really long time. But again, all these things, I mean, COVID really put a downer on Theatre Land of Dreams, because they're in a very bad state, whereas TV has to a certain extent been able to continue. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk more about Edinburgh, if there's anything that's interesting about that. I feel like I just unloaded.
I think that's a really good point. And we've had a couple of people tell us about Edinburgh because, you know, coming from Australia, and I guess it is the same here too, but coming from Australia, like everyone who's creating their own theatre, the mecca, the absolute pinnacle point of where you can go is Edinburgh Fringe. So I find it very fascinating to talk to people from the UK who, you know, it's been a part of their theatre experience, and as you said, you know, you've been there from a young age, and to realize that there's actually some flaws in this system. There's some flaws in this situation. If it's not accessible to all independent theatre makers, then what are we doing? Like we're making a fringe festival that should be able to showcase independent theatre from all voices, from all walks of life, but we're still keeping it unreachable to a lot of people, and that is, I think, very, very sad. And
It's
I
totally
think it's really important to talk about.
It's totally inaccessible. Like, I don't understand. I mean, it shouldn't be called Edinburgh Fringe anymore. It should be called the Edinburgh Festival. It's just not a fringe festival in the same way as it was when it was, you know, conceived. And it's not necessarily the fringe, the Ed Fringe body's fault itself. It's the circumstances around it. You know, everyone really going with the property, like, oh, well, I can absolutely rinse people for this period of time, and the marketing, and just getting, it's like all the shows that like clean up are by established theatre companies. You know, they are places that don't necessarily need that space, and they don't need to be doing the Fringe. Like, we needed to do the Fringe because no one knew what Camilla's company was. No one had seen me before. No one had seen a play of mine before. Like, that's why we were going, because you know, the narrative you're told is go to the Fringe. That's where, you know, you can open the doors. And yes, on paper, the everything we wanted to happen from it, in name of like a London transfer seen by these people, like, and then maybe a couple of nice reviews, like, were all achieved. So it was like tick on that front. But like the cost, you know, even with me being able to go home, work, and like save up, we still couldn't quite afford it. You know, we still were under budget. And it's this space that everyone, it just needs to reassess. It's not the same. I mean, that's why I fell in love with acting, because I went with the youth theatre and I saw all these incredible weird shows, and it was great. And I don't know how much, I don't know what, I'm sure it was expensive then because that was only 10 years ago. But now it's just so commercialized beyond the point of, as is a lot of the theatre industry, of course, but like, and you still see some weird stuff, but you know you're missing so much because there's just so many people who literally can't go. And like won't even try, because like, how could they? you know, it is totally inaccessible, and it's a real shame. And it really, like, we were really fortunate to be shortlisted for one of the awards for like at the end, so we went to go to the award ceremony, and all the winners were all, you know, all the shows that I kind of expected would be, but like, you know, by established theatre companies, and all of these are like a friend of mine who was not an established theatre company did like get a Fringe first, and their show was in like this tiny venue.
Wow.
You know, it was weird, and that was like, I was like, yes, that's what it's about. You know, it's about these people doing something different in a place that you won't have seen, that's not at the Pleasance or the Got a Balloon or Underbelly. You know, it's not about those. Yeah, we can, obviously there's good stuff for those ones, but let's try and not champion everyone just from these spaces. I actually found it really dispiriting, and I would have massive reservations about going back, just because I'm not sure. I don't know, it's hard. I would never discourage people from going. I'd just say really be aware how much work, how much energy, how much money it is. And, you know, we just broke even, like ticket sales wise, you know, just. So that's, yeah, it's a massive risk.
Yeah.
And the opportunities that you get from there, like a lot of the things that have happened to me in the writing sense haven't happened because of Fringe. It's that they've happened because of the BBC thing I did. I think it definitely helps when you're like introducing yourself to people to go, oh, we did do the Fringe, and you know that it has this, you know, and then when they see it transferred, you know, it sort of gets like a little seal of approval of, oh, okay, sort of in that sort of world. But like, I didn't need it, you know, no one's seen it and gone. I mean, obviously COVID also got in the way, because that was sort of like the tail end of that year. We were thinking about doing a tour or something, but then you know, Theatreland of Dreams closed. So I think, you know, Edinburgh is just, like you say, totally agree, it's that space of, it is not accessible. It is not a place for loads of eyes to come together. It is. I mean, it's massively white. It's totally middle class. You know, the only universities are there are like Oxbridge, because they've got the money to send, you know, give their students money to go and just do what they want there. You know, which is great, but not everywhere else can do it. That's why it's only student unions and stuff like that, and professional theatre companies who are like not putting on Fringe theatre, they're putting on like decent shows, you know, like with money behind it. And it's just, it is a shame. It is a shame.
And I think it's also like, it's one of those problems, I guess, for musicians. We have this strange relationship with Spotify, where it's like we upload our music onto Spotify. We don't necessarily get much from it, but we need to do it because that's where the people are. And then the independent theatres feel like we have to go to Edinburgh because that's the step we have to make. But it's like, okay, well, if everyone stopped doing that and we did something else,
literally,
what do we do?
Honestly, this whole, like, you know, this whole, you know, football thing that just happened, like Superliga, and like in this country, you know, and how like quickly you can achieve change. Everyone actually just goes, wait a minute, no, you know what, we're not gonna take that. And if we could orchestrate that for so many things in life, you know, just shows that the people really do have power. But like you say, we felt that pressure. And yeah, the Edinburgh, that's such a good analogy. Edinburgh is like the Spotify of the theatre world. And like, so Maddie's, my partner's brother is a musician. He's pop star sort of thing. And it's, I mean, I've always massively envied musicians, just because music is such like a direct way to talk to people and communicate. And I have very little talent for it. And I've always wanted to, and I've always envied that. But at the same time, like, I see what you guys are going through, and I'm like, you've got it harder than us. Like you say, Spotify just feels, I mean, I don't even know a lot about it, but it just feels criminal. Like, is this how this, like, how does anyone earn money from it? It's like, like they got his family like keeping his songs on repeat, you know, like 24/7, because like from every song he gets like 0.00000 of a penny or whatever, and it's like, let's hit 100,000 streams. It's like, okay, what's that? It's like £2. It's like, oh my god.
I know, but it is this thing that has this validation, and it's like this seal of approval and this like certificate, like Edinburgh Fringe. Like when you've got that written down, you know, on a piece of paper, on a screen, it is that like, oh, acceptance, you know. Where like Spotify, if you get thousands of streams, it's like, okay, well then, you know, that shows that you're a real musician and like you're actually successful, and that is like the bar of what success is. And It is silly because like Spotify could go away like tomorrow, and all of
Yeah.
these thousands and thousands and millions of streams that people like kindly display on their Spotify Wrapped on Instagram. It's
Yes,
like that.
yeah.
What does that really mean? Like, I don't know. It's
I know.
complicated, hey, but
it's again, it's another catch-22, isn't it? It's like you gotta go.
You've got
and we
to
totally
go.
fell into that trap because
Yeah.
like you want to be an artist or whatever and just like make stuff and but at the same time like you need people to see it and you need people to let you tell your stories. And it's all great making work for yourself, but like if you can't take it to the next level, that's when you're going to get burnout because it's not a sustainable way of you can't keep funding your own stuff. You can't keep creating it in that way. And that is just yeah.
And I find it interesting. My duo cover a song by Gillian Welch called "Everything Is Free," and she wrote it when like Napster was kind of becoming an issue back in the day, and the chorus goes like, "Everything is free now, that's what they say. Everything I've ever done, gonna give it away. Someone hit the big score, they've figured it out that I'm gonna do it anyway, even if it doesn't pay." And it's so true because I think in all these situations, it's always the artist that loses. And, that there's been systems and machines built around different artistic industries to capitalize on the art that we are making.
Yeah.
And, we just want to make it. we just want to do what we love. We don't necessarily have this capitalistic mindset to like capitalize on what we do, but other people figure it out for us, and it's crazy. Like when I have a new release coming out, I pay people 1, 2 or 3 euros to listen to my song in hope that they will put it on their playlist. I'm like, you're getting more money just to listen to my song and put it on a playlist than what I'm going to get for all the plays that people are going to. And like people post playlists on YouTube full of everybody else's music and they get hundreds of thousands of views, but that rarely translates to fans for the artist. But they're making money. They're making a living off that. They have Patreon.
It's so funny. It's so funny because capitalism is so rarely the problem. It's a really interesting, unique situation.
Exactly. It's so surprising, isn't it?
We're the suckers. Like, I mean, we're the suckers in it because, I remember a friend of mine showing me Spotify when it first came out. Whenever I was quite young, so I wasn't that switched on. And he was like, "Look, you can listen to all this music for free." I was like, amazing.
Yeah,
none of us went, wait a minute, this is. This is probably a problem, isn't it? We all just went, yes, let's have it.
Yeah, exactly. Were you nervous to write something about such an important topic?
Yeah, massively. Like, really, really scared. Not scared in the writing. It was just sort of like a couple of days before we did it for the very first time. And I was like, oh my God, what if everyone hates it? And it's just, I think it's really interesting. It's something that gets talked about a lot in the writing in the writing world, and it's who has ownership of stories and who has the right to tell stories. And I thought it's something I'm always checking in with. I'm like, when I have an idea, I'm like, okay, am I the right person to tell that story? And I think if you think of a story that maybe you're not the right one to tell, it's like how can I not make that a story, but how can I make that applicable to me? Because like End of Second isn't just a play about a woman's experience of the effects of rape. It's partly about that, but it's also about the man and his experiences coming to terms with the fact that he's a rapist. So I wouldn't have written it if it was a one-woman show, but by virtue of the man being there and him having to interact with her, I had to understand what her experience was. And, I spent far more time on her side of the story and developing that than I ever did on his. Because like you say, it's not a lived experience I have. It's not something I can ever relate to in the same way. That I can't relate to that in the same way that a victim of sexual violence will. So it's like, how do I put myself, if I'm going to do this, because you want to write for the right reasons, and it's like, how do I put myself in this where it's okay for me to tell this story? And you know, you do your research, you read the books, you listen to the podcast, you read your articles, and you speak to people, and that's how you do it. At the same time, you can do all that and it's still not your story to tell. So I think because it was about him as much as it was about her, you know, that sort of gave creative license to understand that space and go into that space, because it was about them, you know, it wasn't about her, it wasn't about him, it was about them. Like at the end of the day, it's just a love story, you know, it's just a love story in that way. But yeah, at the same time, I was absolutely, before we were going to do it, I was like, oh my God, this is a mistake. Because like, there's just like the three of us, me, Camilla, and Maddie, who rehearsed it, and like we're the only ones who saw it. And you know, it's so, rehearsing a show is so interesting because your perception can just be so off sometimes. You're like, I think this is going to be good. And then you open and you're like, oh no, that's not funny, you know, and then, or vice versa. And like, oh, this is bad. And people love it. And you're like, oh no, this is really good. So like, you can't trust how it's going in rehearsal. So it was a big old like roll of the dice. So no, it was scary. I tried to be like as sensitive and respectful and accountable for like what I put in it. I think like there are some people who didn't like it, and that's, you know, obviously going to happen. But like a lot of the mark of success for me wasn't, you know, whatever commercial success it might achieve or whatever. It was, you know, people coming up to me afterwards going, many women just going, that I've had that conversation, or I've been sitting on that park bench where like this scene happens, and I was like, okay, you know, it's like, that's all right then. And like a friend of mine, so the show also was on the radio, it got commissioned by Radio 4 for like a radio adaptation last month, no, 2 months ago, March, it was transmitted. And I saw a mate of mine, and she was like, it was just so, she was like talking about her dad and how he engaged with it in a way that she can't get him to engage with it, sort of thing. If you understand, like just through that act of listening to a fictionalized account of something, you know, it's so much more accessible than someone telling you something sometimes. And obviously I was terrified.
Wow.
Yeah, I really want to ask you about the radio adaptation. Like how different is it preparing something for the stage that's like physical and like you can see and visual as well, I guess, to doing something on the radio where it's just audio and the listener has to use their imagination? What is that process of doing that?
So it's a really interesting process. I kind of got lucky because the text is not very different, like the style of it. So it's written in this sort of way where they're both sort of describing what happens to the other. So it's like, he does this, he does that, and she goes, you know, and she does this, she does that. And so in that sense, it's a really oral piece anyway. So that's why when I met the Radio 4 people, I pitched it as like, I think this would translate really well to audio, because actually there's very little like physical action in it. It's much more, you know, they're either describing the physical or they're just talking to each other, which is, you know, a really easy transition. When you actually get down to the knuckles of it, she's like, you know, the producer I had was really incredible and was like getting me to think about the space, like what space is each scene happening in, what you know, what sound effects are happening around them, you know, that can help create such a sense of place and intimacy. And actually it translated so much better in a way to audio, because you could get this extra intimacy of, you know, not having to project and, you know, being able to be this close to the microphone and just, you know, have this, you know, this painful conversations where you don't really want to speak. And, you know, it's so much more of an intimate space. So it's really thinking about how can I communicate through sound, through like cues that people like understand. Like, you know, you hear a seagull, like, oh, I'm at the seaside. You know, it's that sort of thing. Like, what are the, or like you hear a kettle boiling or something. That's just like really simple things you can put at the top of a scene just to immediately build a sense of a space in someone's mind. It was really fun, actually, really interesting. And I spent like ages also like just conveying the sense. I spent ages trying to find the right music for it. like listening and thinking what could underscore and what could punctuate the different moments. And then they were like, oh no, we can't use any of the songs you suggested apart from this one. So I was like, no. But actually the producers found like this incredible music anyway. So it's like even that, you know, just gave the sense for her. She was like, oh, okay, I know what you're going after here. So I can find something that we can use that is similar to that. So just, it's about, I think what she sort of said was like, just help the sound designer in any way you can. Not everything you put in has to be, I think also there's just like some funny times where you're like, you know, if there's a kiss, you're like, okay, well, kissing kind of sounds horrible on the radio. So how can we do that? Or there was this bit where, you know, she's having a panic attack and on stage it's easy to communicate because she can't speak. She's having a panic attack. He goes and hugs her and then she just pushes him away, you know, all total visual. You're like, okay, how do I, you know, you can't see that. So like you can get heavy breathing, but she's like, you just need to say, get off me. You know, you just have to put in, sometimes it can feel prescriptive, but it's like, you have to build that picture in an audience's mind. Because also radio is so, it's really interesting because it's like, if you drop the ball and you let that space go, it can be really hard for the audience to get back into it. Yeah. If you want them to like properly experience it, you have to build this bubble that's really easy for them to listen into and to see it in their mind. And I think that's really fun about it as well, because everyone who listened to it will have been seeing something different, which is just like such a cool idea. Yeah. Like, you know, all you've got is the voice and the sound. Like they don't know what the actors look like. They don't know what their flats look like or what their school looks like. Everyone will be creating their own picture, which is so much, it's really nice in a way. It's like when you read a book, everyone's got their own picture of the characters and stuff like that.
Yeah. I told her I raped you. I'm sorry you weren't the first to hear it.
I wasn't sure why you asked me here.
To try and make it right.
You can't.
I know.
I told my mum as well. She said it happened to her when she was younger than me. That for years she felt like she wasn't in control of anything. And that's what she wanted back.
I'm so sorry.
I know. I forgive you.
You can't.
It's my choice.
Well, I don't know how to accept that.
It's not for me to make you. I'm not doing this for you. I need to let this lie.
If I could, I'd take everything back in a second.
You can't. There's no point thinking like that.
Do you wish you'd never met me?
I don't know. You're not a bad person. But you did a bad thing. I just wish you'd known before.
Me too.
Amazing. Wow. Moving forward, do you have an idea of, like, because this first performance that you wrote was on a very topical issue that is a really big, important issue that we're to be discussed and that we need to be discussing. Is that something that you'll continue, do you think? Are you passionate about holding the space in theatre to talk about things that aren't talked about much in, you know, normal everyday life?
I think I definitely am interested in holding that space of trying to talk about stuff we don't necessarily talk about. Because I think, you know, in a non-pretentious way, you know, only a certain number of people access a theatre, but in that world, that is what, you know, any form of art or creativity is there for. You know, it's to think about stuff, or it's no, I mean, you know, I write to just understand the world. You know, it's like the universe is so chaotic, and it's just like trying to put order into that chaos and understand what's going on around you. Other people would do it through accounting or different ways, or, you know, just that's their way of putting order in. This is my way of understanding it. So at the same time, I mean, there's like a couple of different ways to create story. Like some people start with theme and then work backwards. So like, I want to write a play about consent, and then the story comes from there. Whereas a lot of other people work from character. It's like, oh, I've got this character in my head. I want to write something about them, and then that's how they find the story. So I think it's a mixture for me. It just depends. I'm not very good at like idea creation. It takes me a really long time to think about something before, because I have a lot of ideas, but I don't know what are good. And I have to think about them for at least a year before I'm ready to write before I'm even ready to start writing. Because if I'm still thinking about it a year later, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a good one. And all the shit ones will have fallen away. So it's like, okay, I know. I think it was someone like, I think Jez Butterworth talked about this on a podcast. I mean, I think his was like 10 years. I'm not willing to wait quite that long. If you think about, so you know what you want to write about if you're still thinking about it a long time afterwards. Because like there's so many times you start a project because you're like, that's a really good idea, and you go into it, and then after the initial like adrenaline of the idea coming to you has burned off, you don't know where to go with it, and you don't know what it's about. But actually, if you let it mull, and if you let it mellow in you, and either it will stay or it will go, and then that's the one you want to go for. So like there's like because I've been writing a lot of TV this year, which is very different. It's much more story driven. They say like TV just eats story, and it does. Like you so much has to happen all the time to keep everyone's attention. It's such a different medium. So in that way, I am just like creating story. Like, and at the same time, I'm trying to at least Trojan horse themes and stuff in there. But like the theatre is a thematic space where the television is not. It's a story space. So like if I'm thinking about theatre, there's about like three maybe four ideas that of varying degrees from like 10 months to 3 months, and I'm still thinking about it. So like I'll know in a couple more months whether some of them are ready to like actually begin the research process and being like, oh, okay, so what actually is the story in this, and how would this work, sort of thing. Something that I like had to like understand, because when you start working from, and I had to like get on top of it before lockdown. So I'm really glad I like got it sorted, but I'm sure like a lot of people struggle with it during lockdown. Is like what happens when you start working from home, and the boundary between work and just life living is blurred. Because when I used to like go places to write, and then I was like, oh but wait, if I don't go, I can get an extra 2 hours writing in that day. So I started working from home, and then you're like, okay, but if I just keep going, I'll just I could do even more. And then you just start, there's no separation between, and then you're always working, and then you're always in this, you're never in the present moment, because you're always in this other space of like, and then you're just, it's that productivity thing we're talking about. You're trying to economize every moment of your day, because like there's a point where I was working the day, I'd come home and I'd write, and like I wasn't getting enough, in my mind I wasn't getting enough done. So I was like, oh wait a minute, there's this whole other time when I'm asleep that I'm not using. So I was like, I'll get a night job, and then I can work in the day as well. So then I went like, so I was doing this, and then I was like going to acting class, I was going to work in the day, and then I was writing in the evening, and then I went, and then I was like, I got a job a trial at a bakery, and then like went to and worked the night shift there, and it started like midnight, and then I got home at 5 a.m, slept till 8, and then like went to work in that day, and just nearly had a panic attack. I was like, and that was sort of like a big wake up call of me of like, separation. So it was fine. Lockdown was actually, in a work sense, fine for me, because I'd already worked that out. But I know if I hadn't already, and I hadn't already been working from home before that, I would have just spiraled in lockdown and just felt like when you're at work, when you're at home, because your laptop's always there, you feel like you should be working all the time. And you forget that downtime is so important, not just in terms of like living, but also for your work, because that's when my best ideas or my best breakthroughs come when I'm not even thinking about them. It's like, or when I'm running or something like that, it's like, that's the fix to that problem. it strikes you. But if you're sitting there and always thinking about it and always trying to do it, your mind just can't think of anything. It's so
oh man,
it is really important to set some boundaries for yourself if you are working at home. And like you say, I get all my best ideas when I'm out for my walk. It's never when I'm actually trying to get stuff done and filling my day with admin tasks and all these other things.
because you're
But
always
when
like,
you
I could just keep going.
Yeah. And then you take a break and you're like, okay, I see clearly now, and I know what I need to do next. And you get that next burst of excitement and adrenaline for this idea and putting it into action, I think. But it is difficult to put an actual barrier in between work time and work headspace and chill time and chill headspace. And
but I think it can also be really helpful for like just creativity in general. Definitely. If you go like now I know my brain works so much better in the morning than it does in the evening. You know, so I write in the morning, and I know the hours are between like 7 and 1 on my work day now. I can do like admin and stuff later in the day, or stuff like this, because I've done my work. So I know that 1 o'clock comes, I'm done. And then you can have that separation because you've done your work. It might have been a good day, it might have been a bad day. But then also once you get into that routine and that practice, your mind subconsciously goes, this is my work time, and that's when your creativity will start firing. There's people that are totally opposite, that will work like, into the early hours of the morning, and that's when their like peak is, and they'll sleep in a bit later, and that's totally fine as well. It's just like finding what I don't prescribe to that. Like, there's all those Hollywood people who are like, I wake up at 4 a.m. and then I go to the gym for 7 hours, then I see my kid for 15 minutes before my lunch is prepared for me, and then I do that, and all their day is like, and then it's like I go to bed at 8 p.m. It's like, well, you've just done the same day but shifted your hours. Like, I don't understand. Why do you think that's better?
It's so true.
Because it's like if you're waking up at 10 a.m. and like going to bed at 2 a.m. and I'm going to bed at like whatever 11 and getting up at 7, we're still sleeping the same amount,
Yeah.
Just find when the time is that works for you.
For sure, exactly.
I guess because like waking up at 5 a.m. is like different, and it shows I'm disciplined.
Yeah, it feels very like committed.
Yeah.
I am dedicated to my art. It's like I'm dedicated to giving up my weekends and my evenings and having no fun whatsoever.
A question that we ask all of our guests, and we ask
them, okay, cool.
Ask them for a word of advice for other artists. If there's any piece of advice that you've lived by that could encourage other artists who might be listening to this.
Advice? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing things and hoping something happens. I don't know. It's just like, I don't want to say believe in yourself. I think there's like, if you're going to keep going with it, there's an assumption and a belief that it will happen, and just have that assertion, because if you do anything long enough, you'll get somewhere, and it is true. It may not be the place that you thought you were going to end up, but like, just keep going, because it does get better. I know I've made it sound like horrible a lot of the time, but actually it's not. I wouldn't still be doing this if this was rubbish. Obviously not. It's great and it's amazing. If you feel like you could do something else, but if not, that's also fine. Like, just know what it is and weigh that up. Just, I'm sure people have given much better advice than that, but that's what I've got.
That's wonderful. No, and I think it's also really encouraging to, hear other artists' stories and know that, because there might be other people who are listening to this now who might be just starting with writing, and maybe their dream is to take it to a theatre festival, and to know that, we all, no matter where we're at in the journey, we all still have similar feelings of like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know where it's going to go. And I think it's comforting to know that we're not alone in that, and that none of us know where it's going, and we're all just taking it day by day and hope that our dream will. That's my advice. You've helped me get to my advice. There we go. Forget your plan. There's no plan. Like, honestly, sack it off. Don't just work and just put it out there and be kind to yourself, because like, there is more to life than like being successful at this. That's what it is. Just forget, because nothing, I guarantee you, whatever your plan is, it's not going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen in the way you think it is. It'll be the thing that takes you blindsided that will actually be your break, or whatever, or it might take 20 years longer. Just forget it. Don't put the pressure on yourself to, like you say, have it done by the time you're 30, because you probably won't. So just forget it. Yeah.
Enjoy the ride. That's what I say.
Yeah. And it didn't happen before I was 30 for me. So
There you go.
Preach.
Well, that's what I find weird about like this dynamic
Is
of
there
like
still hope?
people listening to me, like they think like I know what I'm talking about. It's like, I don't know. This is just what happened to me, you know? Ooh, no.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's what it's all about, honestly.
Exactly. We've got
The
to
exchange.
listen to each other's stories and take what we can.
Yeah, exactly. 100.
Yeah.
Thank you, Theo, so much for being on the podcast today. It's been so nice to meet you. It's been so fun.
No, thanks for having me. Oh, I'm glad.
I do
I'm
feel
glad.
like we're besties now.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
we said we'd be besties by the end, and we are.
We are.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Now try and make it not sound artificial. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
We'd really appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe to our podcast and review the episode so that more people can find us in the future. Your comments help us pop up on people's suggested podcasts, helping our artist stories reach a wider audience.
Podcasts are best shared by word of mouth, so if you know people who might enjoy this episode or the Artwork podcast as a whole, we would love it if you told them all about it or tagged us in your social media posts and stories. And if you'd like to financially support this project, you can contribute on Patreon, where you can choose the amount you'd like to give us for lots of fun rewards.
And if you'd like to be a part of the Artwork conversation, we would love to invite you to join our Artwork Community Facebook group, where you can connect with the artists we've featured on the podcast and share your art with a like-minded community. You can find the link in the show notes, as well as all the links to today's artist.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at art.workconversation.
And stay tuned for our next inspiring episode.
Bye.
Bye.